When God first started out, when he were just getting things off ground, as it were, there weren't much about to talk of. There were just this sort of shapeless stuff floating about, doing nothing. Anyhow, God says, let there be light, he says. Let there be light. And dost thou know, it were as if a switch had gone on in a cubbyhole. There were light all over the place. And God thought, by heck, that's grand. So he says, let's have a bit of that dark stuff and all to set light off a bit. So there were suddenly some dark bits and some light bits. And he called light bits daytime and dark bits nighttime. And so he ended up with very first day. Then God has a think about it, and he thinks, I know. What I'll do is I'll separate them vapours to form sky-like on top bit and oceans on bottom bit. So God goes and melts sky and some oceans, and this were on second day. And then God has a think about it for a bit and scratches his chin like there does when there's thinking, and he says, I know what, I'll gather all that water together in oceans, and then some land will come out of oceans, and there'll be something to grow things on. A right good idea, he says to himself. Because there were no one else to talk to at that time, see? So God goes and makes this bit what were land, and he says, I'll call that earth, and told water bit can be seas. And he did. And he were dead chuffed about it, because things were going right well. Anyhow, after that, he has looked round and he says, let's have a lot of grass and seed plants and fruit and trees with seeds in them, and then they can go mad for a bit and sprout up all over the place, making other plants and fruits and stuff. And so he made grass and seeds and trees and plants and fruits and all sorts of stuff, because he were right enjoying himself. And all this were on third day. So after a good night's kip, God has a look round and he says, what I need to set this off right is a lot of bright lights in the sky. Then we can have day and night and seasons and stuff like that. Good idea, that. And so he made them like he said. And there were this thing that were a sun, and this other thing what were a moon, so they could take it in turns for days and nights. And then he thought, and while I'm at it, we might as well have some stars and all. So we made them dead quick and scattered them about a bit. And he were dead pleased. And all this were on fourth day. And then on the fifth day, God says, what we need is some things that swim in sea and sort of wiggle. And then we can have stuff what flies about and makes noises and that. And so he goes and makes birds and fish in sea, and he tells them to go and multiply by themselves and cover all earth and that. And that were on fifth day, that were. Anyhow, come sixth day, God's having a think about it, and he's thinking, what we need now is some of them animals. So he just waves his arms about a bit, and there's animals all over the show. There's reptiles and cattle and all sorts of stuff. And God were dead chuffed with that. Now God comes to good bit, and he rubs his hands together and he says, right then, let's make us a man, someone like me, and he can live on earth and be boss of all animals and stuff. And so he did. And God says to this man, he says, now, go and multiply and get a grip on earth like, because that can be in charge of all fish and birds and animals and that. And he says, and take a look at this. That's got all sorts of fruit things what that can eat, and birds and animals, they can have all that grass and plants. And God had a good look round, and he were dead chuffed, because everything were just right. So God had gone and made everything right good in 6 days. So on 7th day, God thought, by heck, I think I'll have a sit down and put my feet up for 5 minutes. And God thought this was such a cracking idea that he decided 7th day should be for doing nought, on account of it he just made it an holy day. So now they knows how God made everything. I'll sit it.